What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Corporate Bartender. It's good to be back. I had a spate of work travel to knock out, so I'm a little behind in TCB production, but we're coming back strong today with Sean Lemson. Don't know Sean? Well, stick around. Sean's a leadership expert, executive team and performance coach, and the founder of Motivated Outcomes, a company devoted to improving performance, engagement, and leadership. He's also the author of One Drop of Poison, How One Bad Leader Can Kill Your Company. This conversation was amazing. We laughed so much, we're going to have him on again. TCB Nation, I think you're going to dig this one. So buckle up, TCBers, grab your favorite cocktail, and let's get right on into it with Sean Lemson on today's TCB.
Welcome to SkyTeam's The Corporate Bartender, where we gather some of the best HR and people leaders to discuss what's happening on the people side of business. Now pull up a stool, belly up to the bar, and join us for The Corporate Bartender.
Welcome, everybody. It is your favorite day and mine. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's Corporate Bartender Day. Here we are, the 24th of July, the 202nd time that we've gathered this group of amazing folks. As I say every time, I can't believe 2024 is half done. It's over half done. Like, we are staring down the barrel of Q3 right now. And, you know, I always say Ruby's getting excited because it's almost two things: football season and pumpkin spice season. Both things that Ruby adores. Look at that. Look at those footballs a-flying.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Whoa. Impressive.
Today is going to be a fun day. We've got a guest. We've been talking this guest up for a couple of weeks now. His name is Sean Lemson, and he's the author of a book called One Drop of Poison, How One Bad Leader Can Slowly Kill Your Company. And, you know, book titles with words like poison and kill, you got to wonder, right? What's really going on here, Sean? So we're going to get into that today. But as a group of HR-focused people, I think we've all been there. We've all worked in that organization or on that team or with that one toxic leader, and we've done our best to stave off the bleeding, and we've seen the worst things that can happen. I've seen some people recover from it, but we're going to talk to Sean about this premise, this idea, and get deep into what do we do when we find ourselves in those situations with those toxic leaders. So that's today. We've got some guests upcoming. We've got Mark Shearer coming up on the 31st of July. That's next week. He is known as the coach of coaches, which I think is a pretty bold statement. So looking forward to digging into that. And his quantum leap technique, as a fan of the old Scott Bakula show, I'm excited about that. Are we jumping into other people's bodies to coach folks? I don't know. You just don't know what to expect here. So that's next week. Then things start to happen. We've got vacation coming up. Lori and I are going to Maine the week of August 3rd. So we shan't be here. And then Ruby and I have got some work to go do, like the job that actually pays us money versus this job that costs me money. But then we're back the day before my birthday with Tad Price. And I didn't change the sub-bullet here, so it still says the coach of coaches, and that's the other guy. So Tad is the CEO of a company based in Austin called Ready, Set, Hire. So we're going to talk about talent acquisition on that show. And then we've got a rescheduled show. Trisha Shields, CHRO of Navient, was supposed to be here with us in May, and I believe she had a grandbaby that was born. So on the day she was supposed to be on the show, so, you know, we actually forgave her cancellation and allowed her to reschedule. So we're going to talk about remote workforce culture with Trisha on that day. But today, this is the big deal day. Sean Lemson is here. So, Sean, he his pitch. So when I got his pitch from his PR person, I saw the book title and I was already hooked, right? And then the way PR firms, pitch their segments, it was like, okay, there's always a number. Poisonous leadership, 3 ways to safeguard your organization. I was like, I'm like, ooh, I've written those taglines and, 3 ways, 5 ways, 9 ways. I can make up whatever number you want. There's always a number. So I'm curious as to just how do we deal with toxic people? Because we've all seen it, right? They take a toll on the people in the organization, and that translates pretty quickly to the bottom line. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good conversation because we've all seen it. We all know what it looks like. And dealing with it is a tricky piece of business. So that's what we're going to get in today. We're going to talk about Sean's book. We did not warn him, as we are wont to do, about how we welcome people to the show. So let's do it. Let's give Sean a warm TCB welcome, shall we? See, Sean, we dance people onto the show. That's what we do.
I can only do so much from a chair. I'm sorry.
You know what?
Right.
Chair dancing, totally acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean, for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into your content and talk about what you do at Motivated Outcomes, let's talk about your journey. Because like most of us, I anticipate, I could be wrong, that when you were a tiny baby, a wee child, you did not say, when I grow up, I'm going to be an expert on toxic leadership and help people protect their organizations from it. So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here to be with us today.
Sure. Well, I mean, I've always kind of had an interest in human psychology. Not so much to go actually become a psychologist because that's too much work, but enough that I just like to know how people tick and what's behind my own ticking. And with that interest, when I had some terrible bosses in my life, as you've described, you've had and worked with, you think of it a little differently when you have a hobby in human psychology. You start kind of thinking, what makes this person tick? Why is this kind of person the person that makes everybody talk at the water cooler about wanting to leave? And, why is this type of leader the kind of leader that makes everybody talk about wanting to stay and solve problems, for the company in the shower? I mean, what are the things that make the difference between these kinds of leaders? So that started it. That's kind of been me keeping data points along the way. But then I got into Agile for a while, doing Agile coaching. And when you do Agile coaching, especially when you move up to enterprise Agile coaching, where you're really helping larger companies try to do this, you realize that the leader plays such an important part in the success of this performance of these teams. I would get in there. They used to call me the team whisperer because I could go into any team. You could drop me onto a team that was completely dysfunctional, where when I started, half the team was saying they were already looking for another job. And then in 2 months' time, I could make that team one of the top performing teams at the company. And then some leader would sweep in, inevitably, a month and a half later and just shake the whole organization up, just break the team up, start the whole process all over again, blow it apart, do something really dumb, not check with me, just blow it apart. And I got so tired of that experience. My job became so unrewarding. I was starting to find myself being kind of cynical in the work. And I thought, you know what, I got to go to the source. So I decided I was going to write this book about what it is these leaders are doing that's blowing these teams apart and costing their companies a lot of money, perhaps the future of the company, if not taken care of.
So true. So toxic leaders, how do you spot them? Like, what is a toxic leader, and what should we be paying attention to? You've seen it firsthand. You've been there. You've dealt with it. You've created a series of archetypes about it, which I loved. There are 10 different types of toxic leaders. But from your perspective, what does that mean, a toxic leader?
Well, it's a really good place to start, because one of the things that people make a mistake is they think that a toxic leader is the worst leader they've ever had. And actually, that's not true. And I want to be clear here that most toxic leaders do not wake up every day thinking, how can I destroy my teams today? Like they're not plotting how to do this. They
Evil.
No, these are people who are operating in the culture they're in with the guidelines they think they're given from their leadership team. And they're just doing what makes sense to them. And not realizing that what they're doing is actually causing disengagement with their employees, distrust in the organization. Depending on how high they are, they can cause a lot of havoc in that area. So I guess what I'm saying is this book isn't, while you certainly could pick my book up and read it and think, yeah, I know a leader like that, and I know another leader like that. I think it's also possible for people who are in leadership positions who think of themselves as pretty good leaders to pick this up and think, hey, when I'm under stress, I actually kind of act like this archetype. And I've had some very good leaders who are beta readers of my book who got back to me right away and said, I spot myself right here when I'm under stress. So I'd like you to think of it really open-minded, like toxic behavior is behavior that drives disengagement on teams and causes performance to dip. And it is based upon psychology, and we can talk more about how that's connected. But yeah, it's not just the worst person it's not just a feel-good book that you can have some some like, yeah, I know someone like that. I mean, you really can learn from it.
Right?
Yes, exactly. You can spot yourself. I spot myself in some of my archetypes, even when I'm under stress.
I love that because it's such a real look at the imperfection of humans.
That's right.
And a willingness to have self-awareness, a willingness to actually look in the mirror and say, I might look like that sometimes. That's great.
And you asked me how you can tell or what you should be watching for. Here's the thing. The magical question that I get all the time is, what are the traits of good leaders? And I always spin it around back at the person asking me the question and say, what are the traits of the person you would follow? Right. And then they start naming things off. Well, they would have to take care, I'd have to feel cared for. I'd have to feel like they were transparent with me, that were straight up with me, and they'd have this list of things. I'm like, guess what? Those are all the traits of good leaders, because what is a good leader? A good leader is someone who has followers. Right. And many people who have followers they don't even have any direct reports.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes leaders don't have any direct reports. And there are leaders who have direct reports, there are people who have direct reports who no one thinks of as a leader. Right. So the direct reportness of it isn't what makes you a leader. What makes you a leader is you have people following you. So what I tell companies is that if you're not measuring engagement and you're not measuring it in a way that points back to the leaders in these organizations, then you are missing probably one of the most valuable data points that you can get. Because it is a leading indicator of many other problems. If you're just tracking turnover and all the stuff, that you're just tracking trailing indicators. You're not tracking, and you'll never be able to track things like innovation or loss of innovation.
Yeah.
Right. That's something that you'll just find out when your competitor beats you in the market. That's how you find that out. Right. So, this is the idea of getting ahead of it all.
I loved your opening story. I love stories, and your story about Barbara.
Yeah.
Like, Barbara's not an asshole.
No.
She's doing the best she can do. She's doing the things that she thinks are the right things. But in that story, you talk about, there's a sub bullet in there, and it says, we don't value the same things.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
She said, I pay you to fix all this stuff. And that was sort of the tipping point of Barbara's undoing. So what happened in that story, Sean, in that Barbara sort of devolved into this leader that people didn't want to work for, and it pushed you as a person experiencing it on the front lines as an employee to be like, I don't know that I want to be here anymore either.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you're, in my case, in this example, like I said, at that company, I was known as the team whisperer. So they used to hand me very, very difficult teams. I mean, my boss one time said to me, if you can fix this team, I'm going to put a statue up on the lawn for you. And I did. I fixed the team, and I kept bugging him, where's my statue, But
you'd have to put it at the top of the stairs like Rocky so you could run up to it.
Yes, exactly. Right. And high five it. But the thing is, she asked for these wins. She kept asking for wins, and it was for these bullet listed PowerPoints that she was using to, just so we're clear, she was a peacock. That was the archetype that she fits, which is this, peacocks are people who spread their feathers to their leaders, who tell them, look at how amazing my teams are. And it's all because of my brilliant leadership. And then they turn back to their team and they're just miserable with those teams. They're not supportive for them. It's all for the boss. Okay. And, so she was asking for these wins, and I thought, what a perfect opportunity. I'm going to give her these wins that I've done. I've got this team I just finished, which was quite a feather in my cap, if you will, this team that nobody thought they could fix, and I fixed it. And she was like, yeah, but I need some numbers. Give me some numbers. And I'm like, I can't give you numbers because this is a new team now. Like, there's no baseline for this team. I can't compare it from what it was before. But what I can do is give you firsthand interviews with all the leaders of those teams who are now ecstatic team members that were going to quit but now aren't. Like, I was listing off all these fantastic things that I thought were really great. And she was like, yeah, but if you can't give me some numbers, I'm just going to go ahead and take your win out of the deck. Sean, and that's when I realized, what have I been doing for the last 2 months?
Right.
Yeah. What have I been doing for the last 3 months? Does it mean nothing? Doesn't mean anything that I saved this company from losing probably 5 or 6 top engineers? That doesn't mean anything. It was really very dispiriting. And she had that effect on a lot of people.
So you called her a peacock. You have these archetypes of toxic leaders. And this is one of my favorite things. It's essentially, when you start reading the book and you get into the first chapter, he breaks down each of these, and there are 10. And I won't ask you to break down all 10, but you mentioned the peacock, and I think we got a little bit of flavor for what that is. Give us an example of a couple other archetypes that you've seen a lot in your work out here in the real world.
Sure. Well, there's some interesting ones. I think probably the most common one is the chess master. That's the one.
Chess master.
A chess master is someone who thinks of leadership as a privilege, not a responsibility. They think of it as, I was promoted because I'm smarter than everybody else. I have the answers. My team doesn't. I'm here to tell the team what to do, and they're there to listen to me. And so the chess masters have a very difficult time holding on to talented employees, people who really are free thinkers, who like autonomy. Those people will bail on a chess master, or they'll be miserable if they stay. So yeah, that's a quick about what people feel like a piece on a chessboard when you work for a chess master. They go away in their office, they close the door, they make big decisions that affect the entire team, like the structure, the procedures, everything. And then they just come out and roll it out. And they're often surprised by the fact that none of the team members are really supportive of these decisions.
Why aren't they on board?
Yeah. Why don't they think I'm the legend that I think I am?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, would you characterize that as the smartest person in the room kind of syndrome?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly what they think is the problem. The people who are chess masters spend too much time in the answer space and not enough time in the question space. Okay. So
not listening.
Yeah. So when I'm coaching a chess master, I will tell them, look, I know you are smart, or you wouldn't be here. And I know you know this really well. But what I want you to do is use what you know to form powerful questions for your team. Don't use it to give them answers. So if they give you a solution and it's missing some component that you think, I would have thought of that, put it in the form of a question. How do you plan to address scalability or whatever? And then let the team come up with the answer for that question. It's very hard for them, but if they really want to change, they can. And we could talk about kind of what are the mental hurdles that people have to go over to change their mindsets if you want to later. But
yeah. So we got the peacock and the chess master. Any other ones that you like or you like to talk about?
The funny ones that I think of, one of the ones I think of is funny is the squirrel.
Hammy the squirrel?
Yeah. So the squirrel is, well, for licensing reasons, I don't say Hammy anymore, but it's just the squirrel. So because I think Disney's kind of mad, or Pixar, whatever. I think they can be kind of mad.
If Disney's mad at you, you're doing something right.
Maybe that's doing something right. Yeah. But I call it the squirrel, and the squirrel is basically somebody that's really Probably, honestly, clinically has ADHD, most likely. Somebody who can move very, very quickly and can't stay focused on any one thing for any one time. This is hard for people who have ADHD, even when they're the individual contributor. But when they're the leader, the impact of that is that they just scurry off to the next thing. Nobody feels heard. When you work for a squirrel, you don't feel heard at all. And what they have this thing, and I'm sorry for the mixed metaphor, but I call it seagull leadership, where they sort of they leave, they're off to their next thing, and you're thinking, wow, I have some autonomy. They're not up, they're not micromanaging me. I can go, and you do something, you build something you think is important. Then they come swooping back in and they shit over everything you just did, and then they fly off into the sunset again. And you quickly realize, oh, I actually have no autonomy. So the way that a squirrel operates is, if you ask them, they'll say to me, when I'm working with them, they'll say, I'm so frustrated that my teams are just sitting around waiting for me to tell them what to do all the time. And they can't figure, they think it's the employee's fault. And they don't realize that they've set up this paradigm where if they don't swoop in and approve everything, then everybody's going to end up redoing it anyway.
I love each of the archetypes have core beliefs, and the squirrel's core belief, the first one, is ain't nobody got time for that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you watch any of the Over the Hedge movie and you watch Hammy, you'll see what I mean. It's just impossible to have a conversation with Hammy. He's just, so, yeah.
That's awesome. I think that a lot of people fall into that trap of, they think everyone operates, thinks, processes the way they do. And
yes.
So if you match the style of your leader in that way, then you might have a little bit of a shortcut. But if you're anybody else that doesn't match that style and that leader doesn't tune in, then it's, frustration all around, because, like, why is everybody waiting for me? What is this all about?
One of the ways that I drive this home with squirrels when I'm coaching them is I ask them, have you ever had that time when you're writing a sentence and you read it back and there's 4 words missing, but when you read it, it's correct, right? It looks right to you, but the 4 words are missing. And somebody will say, you forgot this word and that word. Like, oh, I guess I did. Yeah. That they always say that happens to me all the time. Like, well, that's what conversations are like with your employees. You think you're having a complete conversation with your employee. They're hearing a third of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Ruby asked in chat, and I think I know which archetype this is, but I'll let you respond, Sean. What about technical expert? They do great work, super smart folks, but they're terrible at building connection. We tend to call them brilliant jerks or tanks, right? They go in there, they crush their numbers, but not the greatest people to hang out with. And they burn bridges and set relationships on fire.
Yeah, well, that behavior can occur in multiple archetypes. So it depends. I see that a lot in chess masters, honestly. But another place that shows up is the data freak. And these are people who are really left-brained and like to think everything's in numbers. If you can't prove it to me in a number, then you're lying. And they don't say that, but that's how it's received.
But they're right.
That's maybe, because here's whether they're right or not is actually irrelevant in some cases, because the thing is, it's all about effectiveness. So I've worked at companies for data freaks where they would make me do something, just using an analogy here. They would want me to go measure the time it takes me to ride a bike to the store versus the time it takes me to walk to a store, and tell them which one's faster. And I'm like, I don't need to run that experiment. I can tell you right now which one's going to be faster, right? But they're making you measure things as obvious as that. And then the whole organization is kind of paralyzed. And there's a little bit of an insecurity here from data freaks, because they like to stand behind the number as a way to get away from responsibility for a bad decision, because they'll say, well, look at the data. I mean, the data said that, so wouldn't you have done this if you saw that data? And, I like to tell data freaks that I could probably out experiment them with smaller experiments and get farther faster than they can by trying to make sure every single piece of data is perfect before they start.
Oof. So we know what toxic leadership is. We've got these archetypes and their blends and all that. I get that. Throughout the book, you talk about this concept of a leadership mindset. So what is that, and how does it impact behavior?
To me, the concept of a leadership mindset is the key that unlocks everything. It's actually when the book transitions from being kind of cynical to being kind of optimistic. Because for me, this is the key to unlocking your behavior. If you find that you have toxic behaviors and your own style. So a mindset in general is made up of beliefs, values, and principles. Okay, what we believe, we can't prove, but we believe it. I hear these are some examples I hear from leaders. When people aren't working in the office, they're goofing off.
Mm.
That's a belief. Okay. It's not proven. It's not a fact. It's just a belief. People work better under a deadline. Another great one. You know, I hear that all the time. It's not true. Some do, some don't, but it's not a universal truth. Right. And so that's beliefs. Values are things that you value over something else. So for example, I might value loyalty, this is a very dangerous one for leaders to have. Loyalty. I've actually worked with leaders who value loyalty. I will just say there's a certain political figure right now who that would definitely be his top value. But here's the danger. If you have loyalty as a value and you believe that loyalty is owed to you, that is going to make you behave a certain way. If you believe loyalty bounces back at you when you send it down, that's healthy, right? That's a healthy way to have loyalty. But so if you have loyalty as a value, as an example, or you have these beliefs that you can't prove, you're going to wrap those things up in principles. Principles are always like always or never type of things. You know, I always tell the truth because I believe that telling the truth is better than being uncomfortable, right? Or something, right? So you whatever your principles usually wrap up your values and beliefs. And then here's the part where it's kind of the unlock. Your behaviors always line up with your mindsets, always. So just to put this into stark contrast, even serial killers are doing what makes sense to them. Okay. We could look at their values, their principles, and their beliefs, and we would find that their behavior makes perfect sense in light of those values, principles, and beliefs. And so this raises a very interesting point that you can believe you are right. You can feel right and still be wrong. And the reason why we feel that we're right, but still are behaving in a way that is not serving us is because our beliefs, our values, and our principles are not serving us. They're not causing the behavior we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just cracked open so many things there, Sean. Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah. Well, so I think it's also interesting to ask the question of how often do leaders sit down and articulate, well, what are my beliefs and what are my
Very
values?
often when they're working with me, because that's one of the first things I do with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But for a lot of people, they're just barreling through life. Right. There's no self-assessment. There's no self-reflection. There's no taking in of feedback. And so that, you know, and then those patterns become so ingrained and so automatic that there has to be a desire to understand those things about yourself too.
Yeah. So this is where engagement scores come into play, because if you are doing engagement scores and you are able to put them back to a leader, they could be anonymous in terms of the response, but they're coded in a way that you can tell which organizations are the ones giving you these scores. So you know which leaders it's rolling up to. If you're leader and you're getting low engagement scores in your organization, that's the first sign that whatever you think you're doing right is not serving you.
Yeah.
Right.
Intention versus impact. Right.
Yeah. Now this gets complicated by organizations that reward team output. Right. So if I have an organization that up from the top, this is the funny part. Most CEOs would probably tell me that their most toxic leaders, they don't think of them that way. They think of them as their best leaders. I have my best leaders. And I say, well, what makes them the best leaders? Well, I give them a project and they deliver. Yeah, but they could be your most toxic leaders to get you that delivery. They could actually, if they got you that output, but half their team wanted to quit afterwards, would they still be your best leader?
Right.
No. And the problem is we're not measuring and connecting that last part with the leader. And it's, by the way, this is not to fire people. This is not, well, some people probably need to be fired, but not everybody, right? I mean, people can be coached through this.
Yeah.
And so it's really about how do I find the people who need the coaching?
Yep. Because to your point at the very beginning, and we say this all the time, most people don't get up in the morning and think, how can I really mess with people today? How can I really piss people off? Right? What can I do to just really jack with them? Most people don't think like that.
Unless you have loyalty as a value.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Then you might. If you have that unhealthy version, then what'll happen is you will find people who you don't think of as loyal, and you will plot to figure out how to hurt them.
Yeah, you'll punish. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. But that too needs to be challenged, right? If that's your mindset.
For sure.
You said something about loyalty that piqued my interest. I wrote it down, and you said, loyalty for loyalty's sake, I'm paraphrasing here, not a good thing. But if loyalty bounces back at you, what does that mean?
It means that if I'm willing to be loyal to my people and I expect it back, that's healthier than you just owe it to me because I'm your boss.
Got it.
Or because I told you, that you should be. For example, the peacock that we were referring to earlier, Barbara, right? Which is not her real name, by the way.
I figured. I'm sad, but I figured.
Yeah. But her and I, she didn't think that I was loyal, but because what I was doing was what I was doing before she got there, which is questioning all ideas, trying to make sure I was actually trying to make her very successful. I was trying to help her figure out where all the landmines were in the organization and how she could avoid them. And she thought me questioning her was I'm a traitor.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. What I love about that story is I think a lot of people can relate to it, right? You are in a role, you're doing a thing, you have achieved a modicum of success, right? You're good at this. You're the team whisperer.
Yep.
And then she shows up and you continue doing the same thing because it served you well in the past, and you're doing it for the betterment of the collective. It's not about Sean, it's about the company, it's about the teams.
That's right.
Her interpretation of that is different than yours. And it's that disconnect that makes it almost impossible for you to feel like you can be successful. Like,
yes,
I can tell you people that I've coached, and I know people that Ruby's coached and people that Lori's coached. This is not an uncommon story. So if you are the you in this story, if you are the Sean to the Barbara, what is your advice to Sean in those environments?
God, I'd rather give advice to Barbara's boss, but I will.
I know, but somebody's paying you to coach Sean because that's the job I get a lot of the time.
I mean, look, if I'm coaching Sean, I tell Sean to honor his values, right? And if what you find, I mean, look, I'm too late in my career to not be valued for the thing I've been working on my whole career to be good at. So if someone joins my organization above me and doesn't see value in what I'm bringing, I'm not going to alter what I see as valuable. I'm just going to go somewhere where that value is recognized. Right. So it's a really trite advice to give to somebody, like, go ahead and quit. But I mean, there are some leaders you need to move away from, and it depends on where you are in your career. I would say the better advice, and I'm joking, but not, the better advice is to Barbara's boss, and not to let the peacock thing work. Because the thing is, peacocks only work when the boss lets it work. If I were Barbara's boss and she brought me the PowerPoint with all the pretty wins, I would say, well, this is nice, Barbara, but you have some of the lowest engagement scores in the company. So it's cool that you're getting me these outcomes, but yeah, you're like, most of your team wants to quit, and these people are very expensive. We took a long time and took a lot of care to bring these people on and train them, and they like being here, and we don't want people to be here that don't like being here. So I care more about that than I do about these wins. Not that I don't care about the wins, but I also don't think it's a zero-sum game, Barbara. If you go out and make those people want to work here, these results are still going to come here. They're just going to come here with higher engagement scores.
Well, and frankly, if the engagement is higher, they're going to come faster and cheaper and better.
That's right. That's right. And maybe even with fewer people, you don't know. Could happen.
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of Barbara's bosses who they don't want to hear this.
Like, that's hard.
It's hard. I can't even be bothered with peeling that onion. Like, just tell me that everything's going to be okay and let me move on with my life.
Everything's going to be okay. And you should move on with your life right now.
So this notion of toxicity, right? I mean, I think it's a thing we all identify with. We've all seen it. Is it happening more now, Sean, or are we just paying different attention to things?
No, I think it's happening more.
Okay.
I think what's happening is that, well, it's kind of what's happening at a macro scale is kind of what's happening at a micro scale, right? On a micro scale, one of the reasons why toxicity spreads in a company is why I named the book One Drop of Poison, How One Bad Leader Can Slowly Kill Your Company, is because leaders tend to hire people into leadership positions that have the same leadership mindset they do, the same flawed beliefs, the same flawed values that are getting them in trouble. They're like, this person gets me, and that's who they bring in. So before you know it, you have another one and another one and another one. And that's how it spreads inside of an organization. So that's happening at a micro level inside of companies. But I think these people, as they move from company to company, they've been promoted at their last company. So they go to the new company and they go, this worked for me at the last company. I'm going to bring it to this company. And then there you go. So we have a lot of people being put into leadership positions that got no training on how to be leaders. Yeah. They were good widget makers. They, maybe making widgets was one of their fortes, but managing widget makers is an entirely different thing. And to the point you made a second ago where you said this is hard. Yeah, it is hard. And actually, I would argue it's so hard. That's why Barbara sucked at it too, because leader's job is to actually be a people person. Yes. Your job is to lead, right? Mm-hmm. Not to set targets and stick and carrot people to that target. Your job is to lead people and make sure they know what they're doing, and then get out of their way and get other people out of their way so they can get the job done.
Mm-hmm. So you're making me think of certain political leaders and their new lieutenants, their new people that they brought in, right? Again, we see that behavior all the time.
Yep.
So if you're an employee, right? You're just a person trying to make your way in the world, and you work for a Barbara who works for a person who just doesn't have time to hear about it. How do you maintain your sanity? How do you go to work every day and feel like a competent human being?
You can't. There's not a magic strategy to this other than I can tell you this is what's behind the quiet quitting movement. This is what's behind it. It's the idea, well, I can't go anywhere else, or I don't feel like I can go anywhere else, or whatever. And I don't want to be here. So I'm going to basically do exactly what you pay me for and nothing else. You want me to be a set of hands and not a brain? Cool. Then you just bought yourself a set of hands and not a brain.
Mm-hmm. Oh. And so Leah made a point in the chat talking about maybe why we're seeing this more. It may be more people are more willing to talk about it as the followers of the toxic behavior, to say, hey, this is not super cool. Right. And I wonder if in your experience, Sean, is there kind of a shift in the generations in their willingness to stick with a toxic boss or not? Because, we hear a lot about millennial, Gen Z, stereotypes.
Yeah, sure.
Basically saying, I won't tolerate it. Right. Like, I got other options. I'm out.
And this is one of the reasons why I say in the book several times, it's going to be a competitive advantage for companies who get this, because you are going to attract the young, innovative talent who will give it their all while they're exiting the companies that don't get it and are still trying to treat them like they treated my generation, which we tolerated, but they won't.
I had so high hopes for Xers, and we let me down on many levels.
I know. But I'm trying to make up for it. I wrote a book, and I'm trying to wake up people, that are falling behind.
Right.
You're killing it, dude. Killing it. So you in the questions that I got in the pre-read, there's a big picture question here, and we've alluded to it a couple of times by certain political candidates or whatever. What's the connection that you see right now, Sean, between poor leadership and society writ large here?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this inspiration comes from Bob Chapman, who is the CEO of Barry Waymiller. He wrote a book called Everybody Matters. It's probably one of my favorite books. I have several that I think of as really kind of defining my guardrails of where I am in my career, and this is one of them for a variety of reasons. But he really made a strong connection for me between the health of his employees and the health of their health when they go home.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, he's got a quote. I'll probably just paraphrase it here, but it's something like, who you work for is statistically like 10 times more important than who's your doctor in terms of your actual longevity. And the thing that's really interesting about this is we tend to think we can compartmentalize it. I think all of us hope we can.
Yeah.
We think we're having a rough day at work, but when I clock out and get on my car to come home, I'm not going to be this way with my spouse, or I'm not going to be this way with my kids. But in actuality, we are. We are shorter. We're like, not now, honey. I can't talk now. I have this thing to work on, or I can't help you with your homework right now. I'm sorry. I have to finish this for my work tomorrow, or just some. And we're not realizing, or worse, I'm giving you the not now, honey examples, but there are way worse examples that happen in the world that I think we can imagine. These are called adverse child events, or ACEs. And when they happen during certain formative years, there's actually really strong evidence. And I point this evidence out in the book. There's really strong evidence to show that the actual brains change of adolescents and young kids when these adverse child events happen. And then, look, maybe it's just correlation and not causation, but it's interesting to me that the average age of mass shooters has gone down like 15 years, 20 years. They're
bananas.
Now like 20-year-olds, they used to be like 35, 40-year-olds.
Yes.
I don't think that's a coincidence, but maybe it is. I mean, someone who's a data freak will probably call and leave a comment on your comments, but
I'm a data freak. Hey, Ruby, you asked a question in the chat, or made a comment and a question. Can I bring you in and have you talk about that? Because I think that's a important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was trying to formulate the thought and listen. So let me just sort of say out loud and see what you would add. But when we were talking about sort of the younger generations, I think, God, that's a really good point. Like they don't know what the expectation is in a workplace. They have no idea. All they know is like, how do I feel here?
Yeah.
That's it. And holy shit, that's an amazing indicator, right? How do other people feel in your presence as a leader? Like is like, are they loved on? Because it's a relationship to them. And are they loyal to the organization or not? And they don't have any idea of what a good boss is, or a crappy boss, maybe from their working at McDonald's or waiting tables or whatever, but it's a different kind of environment. So do they feel seen? Do they feel important?
There's another thing that I think people are missing. Sorry, you didn't get to your question.
Yeah, no, there really wasn't a question. It just sort of popped for me when you were talking. So I love, build on. Yeah.
There's another piece that I think people are missing, which is there's a cynicism in this younger age. Yeah. And that cynicism is because this generation, think about this for a second. This generation sits at the Thanksgiving dinner table with two generations of people who have been tossed from their company just to make the numbers one quarter after being there for 10 or 15 years or 20 years, right? They either their grandfather or their father or their mother or their grandmother, somebody at the table has got a story about how companies are not loyal to employees anymore. There used to be, it's not anymore. And if there was any doubt in my generation that was true, it has certainly been extinguished in this generation. This generation has basically, the illusion has worn off.
Yeah.
So they are all thinking about themselves, not the company. And that to me is a really bad pattern. I'm not like over here as Mr. Pro-capitalist or anything, but I'm just saying if capitalism expects to survive, then they have to make sure that workers feel cared for and that it matters. You can't just tell them, oh, you guys are like family to us. And then the first time the stock number looked like it's going to tank one quarter. Sorry, it's just business. Don't take it personal. Wait, I thought we were family, So, I think that the illusion's worn off.
Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, right? We alluded to it before, right? The notion that, I said Gen X has let me down. Gen X is in this weird position between parents who worked at a place for a long time and kids who work at a place for a couple of years, right? And I don't think we knew how to deal with that as we were trying to fight the archetype that we grew up with, right? Like you go to work after college and you stay there until you get a gold watch and you retire and go away. That became impossible for us to do, right? So I was a job hopper. What was labeled as a job hopper 15, 20 years ago, right? You stay somewhere 2 or 3 years and you move on. Now 2 or 3 years is a good run, right?
Yeah.
And I think people are making decisions that are more time relevant. You know, in history, my parents made decisions based on what would happen 10 years, 20 years from now. We tried to figure out how to make decisions somewhere in between. But like my kids, they're making decisions on what happens now, like right now. If my boss does something that's a deal breaker for me, like both my kids have said to me, I would be out. I'm done. Like I'm not giving you a pass on a thing that contradicts my values.
Yeah. And some of that is because you and I could have taken for granted that we thought our bosses, that the decision was going to be ours.
Right.
Right. When we left. Whereas your kids in that generation, they've realized that it may not be theirs. That's so they're doing the, I'm going to break up with you before you break up with me thing.
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, and that's what I see in HR, you know, Leah can speak to this too, is we've got hiring managers of certain generations who have this concept of loyalty or job hopper or what this looks like on paper, and they make these judgments. And we have to always recalibrate and say, hang on. This is not a character flaw that this person has had 3 jobs in the last 10 years, right? Let's look a little deeper. Let's ask why. Yeah. And frankly, if they stay with us for 3 years and knock it out of the park and kill it and create all kinds of cool shit, great. And if it's time for them to move on, it's time for them to move on, right? If
I'm the CEO of that company, I'm like, challenge accepted. How do I make it so that people want to stay here longer than 3 years? If I really want that, right?
And that's the secret sauce of culture. And that's the secret sauce of aligning people's values with how it feels to work in that organization and feeding those diverse needs at an individual basis. And that's hard for leaders.
It's hard for leaders who don't know anything about human psychology. It's actually not that hard if you do. I'll tell you, I'm not being flippant about that, we've known what motivates human beings since 1950. Some of the studies that books that I'm putting in my book as references are Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the theory X and theory Y. Yeah. These are things that go back to the 50s and 60s, right? What we have are leaders who just end up getting successful because they delivered a result, but they did it at the backs of commanding people to do it and maybe sticks and carroting their way to do it, but not from a way of like, follow me and having a bunch of people just get behind them and follow them. Because if they did, they would find we have leaders like that. We really do. I mean, if we think about it, we have leaders in our world who people just naturally gravitate behind and want to go do whatever they tell them to do. Yeah. I think we need to look for those people more and reward that behavior more.
Yeah. Need to study cults and how they motivate people.
Yeah. I mean, I can't argue with that.
You're not wrong.
Superpower for good.
It makes me think
apply these principles, but in a good way.
It makes me think of, you know, I sort of came of age in the 90s, and that's when I got my, you know, my graduate degree and my management chops, and it was a different time, right? The Jack Welchian movements, right? Yeah, burn off.
Sorry if I shuddered over here. I know, I'm not a fan. Yeah.
No, but like in the late 90s, early 2000s, not only was he a regarded thought leader, I mean, best-selling author. I mean, people looked to thinking like that as, well, that's a player status, right? That's what we aspire to be. And, you know, I sometimes encounter clients who the methodologies that they put in place to do things that I don't think they can see it, right? But it's like, hey, we're going to do performance management. We have to do it a certain way because we only have so much money. We only have so much time. So we're going to do this. We're going to implement these processes that put into place what amounts to sort of Welchian views. And it's crushing to the employee base.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't see it because, again, it's the pattern. It's, you know, we've always done performance management. We have to do it in a way that we can process and pay for and do it in this time frame. And that's why I think we've seen a lot of people struggle with things like performance management. You know, there was a run here a few years ago where a bunch of marquee companies were like, we're not doing that anymore. And then that didn't work. And then they're like, I guess we should swing the pendulum back the other way. From your perspective, Sean, just in this lens of toxic leadership and effective leadership, performance management is a thing that we have to figure out. What is your pearl of wisdom, your sort of talking point if we were just standing at a conference and I said, okay, toxic leadership, yeah, I get it, but we got to manage our performance. What do we need to do? What would you recommend?
I mean, first of all, you got to keep your eye on the ball. What are you trying? What outcome are you trying to get from performance management? Because think of it this way: if you ran your marriage the way companies run their performance management, you would check in with your spouse once a year to find out how things are going.
That's a terrible idea.
I'm sorry, but I'm just saying, like, how successful is your marriage going to be if you check in once a year with that relationship to see if everybody's getting what they need from it, right?
I mean, Sean, Lori and I have quarterly check-ins, so
we're so advanced.
I'm not even sure that's enough. You know, yeah. But I'm saying, like, if we just lightened up on the idea that the outcome of, let's split it out, right? The outcome of making sure you're happy and that we're happy is something we should be doing all the time. It's like an ongoing, not a formal thing, just an ongoing thing that leaders do with their employees. We're just checking in all the time. If that part's happening, then you're always getting coached on things you could improve, and you're always working to be better, and they're working to make it the world better for you. That would be separate from, like, should you be promoted? And what's the pay scale you're at, and so on. We need to peel those outcomes apart from each other, because the fact that we keep mushing them together is what makes people feel weird about the process the way we do it today. Was that pearl of wisdom enough?
Oh my gosh. That's, you know, it basically, yes. And it sets up I could talk about this all day, and we should probably have a part 2 to this conversation because
anytime
I was watching the time, and then I got carried away with the conversation, and I realized we're coming up on top of the hour. So, Sean, thank you. Great conversation. Fantastic book. The book is called One Drop of Poison: How One Bad Leader Can Slowly Kill Your Company. Sean, tell us where we can find the book and where we learn about you, and what is motivatedoutcomes.com.
Yeah, so you can get the book anywhere you can buy a book. If you like to support local bookstores, it's in their system. They probably won't have it on the shelf, but they can definitely get it for you. If you want to get it faster, you can get it from Amazon. If you go to motivatedoutcomes.com, which is my company's website, there is a link right there that you can buy the book directly from the publisher, and you will save $10 off of what Amazon's charging. And I even get a little more money that way. So fantastic way to buy the book and support me. Motivated Outcomes is the website of my company. It's where I do leadership consulting, try to help companies that are having problems with engagement and morale, and or want to set up a leadership development curriculum and don't know how to do that or where to begin. That's something that I do. And you can see all about my process there. You want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, you're welcome to follow me there. I do post from time to time there. And I have a YouTube channel. Motivated Outcomes has a YouTube channel, which I'm way behind creating videos on. I have to make videos for the archetypes. So I just finished a video for the invertebrate, which is one of the archetypes. And I'm coming up on the next one. So
awesome.
I love it. I love it. If you if you need to have someone play the part of the data freak, I'm willing to do that for you.
Well, yeah,
Happy.
no problem. We'll work with you on that. I'll get some data together for you about it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sean, this has been great. Thank you again so much. More claps for you. We're going to transition into our end of show ritual, get on to our funny things, good feels, silly cocktail, and then it's dinner time, everybody. Almost dinner time in Portland. So
Almost. Yep.
almost. All right. Funny things. Funny thing number one today. Due to recent events, Ouija boards are no longer permitted on the patio. The quote is, "What were the recent events?"
Yeah, no kidding.
Seriously, what happened there? I don't know. As someone who's been known to watch things on Netflix for long periods of time, Netflix needs to stop asking if I'm still watching and start asking if I moved the laundry to the dryer yet.
Yes. Whoops.
As the political events unfolded this weekend, this tweet came out. In breaking news moments like these, there should be a type of podcast you can listen to in real time, easily accessible for free. Radio. You're thinking of radio. I have two funny things today that you have to sing in your head. And if you know the Talking Heads song, Psycho Killer, which Ruby, I know you know because of Leslie, just read this right here. It's a sign for a cafe called Kesh Cafe. And it says Psycho Killer, Kesh Cafe. In my other onomatopoeic here, sort of funny thing, I saw this one today and actually added it at the 11th hour. Fun fact, Emily Dickinson's use of common meter enables one to sing pretty much all of her poems to the tune of Gilligan's Island. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality.
Immortality. Yeah.
For those of you,
Gilligan's Island.
yeah, for those of you that are younger than us, Google Gilligan's Island and watch the theme song. In another just gasping breath for Gen X life. Back in my day, we listened to music on CDs.
Yeah.
What are CDs, Grandma? Wait,
Come on.
but there's more. CDs nuts. Oh, hey.
And that's the kind of joke that grandma would make, actually. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
best
because
part.
she looks like Betty White to me, and Betty
Yes.
White would say D's nuts.
Oh yeah.
Oh my
I
God.
saw a meme and it was essentially in the same vein where it's 2078 or something. It's like that somebody finds a mixtape of their CDs and they open it up. They're like, "Grandma, what's this mix?" And she puts it in and it's like, "Back that ass up." And it's like,
Yeah.
like ridiculous
Naughty by Nature or
songs
something,
from
yeah.
2000s. And she's just like, I should have known better to put a mix in.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right, today's good feel story. This one's going to get you. It's a rough one. But Steve Hartman doing Steve Hartman is a good one, right?
Totally. You should have flipped those to the funny later. Now I'm going to be crying all through dinner.
I know.
We'll bring it back around to funny. Today's semi-quarantine cocktail is a riff on a cocktail that's
Oh my
legitimately
God.
called the Electric Shark. You're going to need an ounce of spiced rum. In a life imitates art moment here, a little bit of blue curacao, 13 sharp-nosed sharks were tested off the coast of Brazil. 2 ounces of pineapple juice. These sharks had as much as 100 times the concentration of cocaine in them that had ever been reported before.
What?
A little bit of ginger beer. Just for context here, last year, the U.S. Coast Guard pulled 14,000 pounds of cocaine out of the Caribbean and Atlantic.
Yeesh.
So drug runners are dumping coke into the water, and it is now getting into the sharks, which make the movie Cocaine Shark Potential. This is the world that we live in today. Cocaine shark is not off the table.
This did not make me feel better after that video.
No.
For real. Like, we have sharks high on drugs because people keep polluting. Cool, thanks. Let's not do that.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to sleep tonight.
Or ever swim in the ocean again.
I never would anyway. I always tell people that. They're always like, oh, the odds of getting attacked by a shark are so small. I'm like, you know what they are if I never get in the ocean? Zero.
And now
Yeah.
you could get attacked by cocaine shark. And on that note, happy Wednesday, everybody. Have good dinners. Thanks to Sean. Thanks to all of you for being here today. We will see you next week. Have a good dinner, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you had a good time and learned a thing or two at today's happy hour, please share it with your friends. If you want to join our tribe, head on over to skyeteam.cloud/TCB or email us at info@skyeteam.com. That's SKYE team.com. Thanks again, and remember, you've always got friends at the Corporate Bartender.